You're watching Medfield TV, Community Shows.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks everyone for coming this evening. I'll be doing a short presentation of the 2019-2020 school year budget, and then we'll take questions at the end. So on behalf of the school committee and all of our teachers, staff, and students, this is our presentation for the FY20 public hearing. So just some important background information as we go through this process. The superintendent is the budget officer, and that comes out of the Medfield Public Schools policy. Three general areas of responsibility for the superintendent as budget officer will be budget preparation, budget presentation, and budget administration. Tonight's budget is often called the superintendent's budget, so essentially there's no actual FY20 budget until the school committee votes on that this evening. This is the budget that we submit to the town. By town charter, we have to submit our budget by January 31st. So that doesn't mean that the budget doesn't change from now until town meeting. In fact, it always changes from now until town meeting. So please don't think that because the school committee votes a budget this evening that it cannot be changed or adjusted. This is just a superintendent's recommended budget that then becomes the school committee's budget. So some important terms this evening. Chapter 70 funds, so you hear us talk about Chapter 70 during these presentations. That's the money that's earmarked to the schools from the state. Unfortunately, Medfield does not get a lot of Chapter 70 funds. Out of our budget last year, just over $6 million. So that's all based on property wealth and wealth in the community. So they use an equalized value, and if you hear in the news a lot now, they're trying to revamp the whole Chapter 70 formula. Because of communities like Medfield that don't get a lot, I'm a little concerned in what I hear and read based on coming out of the state right now that it's going to be focused on cities again, and that the suburbs will take a hit again for Chapter 70 funds, but just, you know, that's something that will be determined pretty soon. Circuit breaker is something you'll see through this presentation. That's money that we get from the state as a reimbursement for special education. So once a student goes above a certain threshold established by the state, typically around 31,000 or so, we get reimbursed for that. So that could be a student that is out of district or in district. Collective bargaining agreement, CBAs, so we have contracts with our teachers, custodians, secretaries, and cafeteria workers, and we're currently negotiating a contract with our teaching assistants. Steps, lanes, and percent increase, that's the pay structure that you'll see in any collective bargaining agreement. Step is a yearly increase on the grid. Lanes are increased based on degree attainment, which is a horizontal move, and then a percent of the increase is the amount added to the base. FTE, or full-time equivalent, is a full-time employee or a fraction of that. Per pupil expenditure is the total amount that the town or school district spends on each student. So the Department of Ed established this many years ago as a way to compare apples to apples with school districts. So it takes everything you spend in education except for transportation, and it puts that all together. This is all from the end of the year report, which we submit each year, and then it comes out with an average amount spent per student. A level service budget is something that you may or may not hear sometimes in budget presentations, but that's essentially looking at the same amount of people, same programs, no increases either way. And then our capital budget, which is not part of this presentation tonight, but you'll hear about that in FY20. That's separate from our operating budget, and it typically goods that are long-term, 5 years or longer. So here's our outline for this evening. We'll go through our mission statement, the budget process and assumptions. Let's look at some things that have been new in the past 3 years. The Medfield 2021 budget priorities, so those are things that are directly linked to our strategic plan. Some of the budget drivers, funding sources, benchmarking data, which we'll take a look at other districts compared to ours in certain areas. The FY20 budget summary and breakdown, and then increase breakdown, and then just a discussion on going forward prior to questions. So our mission statement, I think it's always important to frame any budget conversation around what drives the work that we do each day. Medfield Public Schools will create a dynamic and collegial learning environment. Curriculum and instruction will guide students to achieve high standards and meet the challenge of change. Through school, family, and community partnerships, students will be prepared to become responsible, sensitive, contributing citizens and lifelong learners. Each year, when we do our administrative retreat in the summer, we pull that apart a little bit and assess how we're doing and try to make changes to make sure that we're living up to our mission statement each day. So the process to date, I won't go through each one of these, but essentially we start in November, and the principals, directors, and department heads put together their budgets of what they think they need. So we don't just add a percentage on to each line item. We do a budget of need. We zero-base budget. We ask people to create what they think they need in their department, school, and then we go from there. That is also staff, personnel, and non-personnel. We go through that entire process. We have meetings with all of them. Michael LaFrancesca and I sit down and meet all of November and December with them and go over those figures. We put that all together, and then we present that to the school committee. And then during that process, we also have the Board of Selectmen Warrant Committee meeting, which I affectionately call the doom and gloom meeting each year, because my 13th year as a superintendent in 2 different towns, it's the same thing every year. Same message, we can't spend, we don't have any revenue, you know the story. So that happens every year. And then we develop the initial budget, present that to the school committee. School committee talks to us about what some of their priorities are. We make adjustments, and we had an initial meeting with the school committee and the warrant committee to discuss, you know, where we are in terms of our budget presentation. So some of the assumptions we made when we built this budget. One of the ones that's really concerning to us is federal entitlement grants will be reduced again. So we lost money this year. You know, they can't even stay open, never mind commit to us of what we need for school districts. We're assuming that's going to happen again. So the federal entitlement grants that we have that are really important to us, 94-142 is our special education, our Title IIA, which is our professional development, and Title I, which was completely cut to 0 this year, well after the budget ending, budget being passed, in April. We found out in late August, early September, that our allocation of about $85,000 was cut to 0. When we talked to the federal government about that, their concern and their reasoning behind that was they look at the poverty level in each community, and that determines how much money you get at the federal level. So Medfield has now, based on the data they're using, Medfield has now dropped below 2% poverty. So without having above 2% poverty, you lose funds like Title I, and apparently from what we've talked to them, it looks like we're in that same position again for next year. Chapter 70 will be level funded. So if you saw the governor's budget that came out last week, there was a big hoopla around changing the formula in 7 years and this and that. It came out to be $20 more per kid for Medfield. So that's not going to do a heck of a lot. It's better than $20 reduction, but it's not going to do a lot for us. Our anticipation is that the House and Senate, when their budgets come out, there'll be more money in there. They typically are. Usually the House wants to outdo the governor, and the Senate wants to outdo the House and the governor. So typically they come to some agreement, but we usually don't find that out until well after town meeting. So typically we find that out in late June, early July. That's when the fiscal year budget is done. Enrollment will increase again, so we're seeing an increased enrollment in our younger grades, not so much in our middle and high school. But we have projections. Those of you that have been to school committee meetings know we've been talking about these projections. Over the last 10 years, we've seen enrollment drop by 13.7%, and we are looking at enrollment increase over the next 10 years of over 31%. And we have 2 different data points on that. One is from NESDEC, which has done our enrollment projections for a long, long time. They do over 400 school districts in New England. They're pretty reputable in terms of their projections. But as we went through the Dale Street process in our prior to the feasibility, they have a huge department that goes through and does a lot of statistical analysis on what your enrollment is going to be. When we wrote the statement of interest for Dale Street, we wrote that on 2 years ago, that data that we had from NESDEC, so we projected a 3, 4, 5 school at 600 students. When we went to that meeting this past fall and we had the conversation with MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority, they told us you have to build one that's 860. There's no way you're going to be able to fit 600 students in a 3, 4, 5. They actually have projections in 2023, I think it's either second or third grade, that's over 300 students. hard to wrap my head around, so that's never happened here. But that's the projections that they have for us. So we anticipate that enrollment increase again at the lower grades. We're continuing our tuition-based programs, which essentially are full-day kindergarten and preschool. And then circuit breaker will be funded at 67%. So circuit breaker, as I said earlier, was that mechanism we get reimbursement for special education. When the law was instituted, it was 75% reimbursement. It's been as high as 75, it's been as low as 42. So we're trying to be a little conservative here with a 67% reimbursement rate. It could be higher than that, it could be lower, but again, we don't know until much later in the spring. We don't want to budget for 75 and have it committed at 60. So I know that's pretty small for you, but just, I'm not going to read all of those, but just some highlights in the last 3 years of things that we've done, especially for new parents that maybe weren't around when some of this stuff was done. So we completed our strategic plan, Medfield 2021, expanded the elementary school day to 6.5 hours. One thing that some folks that are new may not know, we moved from a 3-tier to a 2-tier bus system. So prior to that, 4 or 5 years ago, if you have a student in Memorial, you put your student on the bus, and if you had a student at Wheelock, you wait 45 minutes and then put that student on the bus because of the way the times were. So we condensed that into the 2 runs that we have now. Lots of technology increases, as you can see, and improvements. Implemented the RISE program 9 through 12. Again, lots in there. Partnered with beginning years to do an on-site staff daycare at the high school. We now have an SRO. We partnered with the police department. Became a challenge success district with Blake in the high school this year. Restructured our special education. We saved some money around that. Some of the bigger projects that we've had in the last 3 years, we completed our turf track and field project with great support from the community. Completed a new boiler at Wheelock. That was done through MSBA. So we got, I think, $189,000 reimbursement back to the town with that. And then, as I spoke earlier about Dale Street, so we are in the middle of the Dale Street project now. We were just moved in December to the feasibility study phase, which was what was approved last year at town meeting for the $1 million. So just some items in the Medfield 2021 that have direct budget implications. Looking at goal number 1, we would commit to that collaborative learning culture and continuous improvement for our staff and students. Maintain and enhance current staffing is a big part of our strategic plan. Continue that commitment to professional development. Strengthen and expand our STEAM. Elementary report card revision, which is something that will be unveiled probably late spring and hopefully implemented at least in a pilot form next year. We've had lots of teachers and administrators for the last 18 months working really hard on an elementary report card revision, and it came out great. A lot of technology infrastructure stuff that we've had to do, and then purchasing the one-to-one devices. Those of you that have been around know that I put in the budget a couple of times to fully fund the one-to-one at the middle school, but that's been taken out of the budget a couple of times. Goal number 2, committed to supporting and developing health and social emotional well-being, maintain our current staffing again, wellness and RISE program, continue that commitment to professional development. It's something that we did last year with Interface, which is that referral service that we paid for out of our budget that was for the whole community to mental health resources for families and anyone that needs them. So goal number 3, looking at developing and committed to developing the whole child. Special education staffing, we have additional positions in special education in this budget, you'll see. Staffing restructure, we did some restructuring when Mary came on board, and I'm sure we're going to do a little bit more of that in the coming years. ELL staffing, we've seen an increase in our English language learner kids in the last couple of years, so we've had to add staffing there. And then maintain and enhance opportunities for students outside the classroom, and I have in parentheses stipends. So as we go through the budget, you'll see that in the last negotiations with you today, the teachers, we agreed to allocate $100,000 over 3 years to address the teacher stipends. So we had a group of teachers and myself and Michael LaFrancesca looking at stipends. They hadn't been adjusted here in probably 20 years. So stipends are additional funds that teachers get for doing an activity outside of a classroom. So it could be coaching a sport, it could be being a department chair. There's a wide range of those. So we wanted to make sure that we addressed those, and that was part of our commitment, and this is year 2 of that. Goal 4 is committed to contributing to the vibrant community. One of the big things in Goal 4 was the allocation of resources across all schools. That was something that was important to us when we were doing the strategic plan, and it wasn't always the case, so we wanted to make sure that was happening. And then goal number 5, committed to continued investments in facilities. So we have a shared director of facilities position with the town, which is really important to keep that position. Resource allocation, the technology infrastructure, again and again, the Dale Street feasibility study are all important too. So some of our drivers for FY20, no surprise that instructional and personnel costs of the drivers in this budget, like they are in every other school budget in Massachusetts. That's just the way we're designed. We have lots of staff, and we're a people organization, and that's how it works. So our CBA agreements and contracts, and then we're still negotiating with the MTA for a teacher assistant contract. Again, that's going to be a driver as we go forward. Transportation is particularly a driver this year. We're in year 3 of our 3-year contract with our general education transportation. But the hit that we took this year was our special education transportation with the Accept Collaborative. So for many, many years, we've worked with several districts looking at economies of scale of transporting elementary kids. Special education kids. And that's worked real well for a lot of districts for a long time. What we found out in November that one of the major players in our economies of scale, Framingham, was pulling out of it without warning. We got no warning on that, and Framingham essentially was 49% of the busing that we had in this consortium of busing. So it spread the costs onto us. So Holliston, Medway, Natick, Dover, Sherburne, Medfield, and Ashland are really taking a huge hit in transportation. So that's probably one of the reasons, or that is the reason I'll show you that we're not at that 4% target that we're trying to get to, was really because of that transportation piece. Special education, always a driver too, the in-district positions that we're adding, out-of-district to placements in tuitions, and then program development in-house. Our PD is important. So we've had those cuts the last couple of years. We cut last year, even though we had an override, we cut last year. And we also lost the Title IIA money, which was our federal money for professional development. Our infrastructure upgrades, applications, and devices for technology. Enrollment increased 1 teacher at Memorial. You'll see as we get through this that we've, based on the data that we have right now, that we think we can add just 1 kindergarten section, not the 2 that we had projected earlier in the initial. And then health insurance costs, it does not appear on our side, but it certainly impacts what the town can give us. And we are, unlike a regional school district, which carries health insurance, town school districts do not carry health insurance, so that impacts certainly the town side of the budget. So let's look at the funding sources. We like to look at funding sources out of 3 different buckets. One is the Chapter 70A, which you'll see is the $6.2 million. This is our current school year, FY19. Local contribution is over $28 million. And then the others, which is our grant fees and tuitions. So we generate another $3.4 million to run the district as you see it today. So as I say, although it's $35 million, it costs $38 to actually run it the way the way we run it today. And one thing that sometimes folks forget is that Medfield also has to contribute to Norfolk, Aggie, and to Tri-County. Right now, the allocations that were for FY20 that were just posted on Friday, 156 and 57 to those 2 schools. So that's additional education money the town spends that does not come directly to the Medfield Public Schools. So some of the additional funding sources and amounts, so state and federal grants, this is what we're projecting right now for the current school year. Not all of it is complete yet, obviously. 622 for the state and federal grants. Our tuition's at around 600,000. School lunch at 7. Athletics at 350, and that's all through fees. Undistributed receipts, so that's we get for facility rental, parking, those kinds of things, 380. Private grants and gifts, so that's PTO, MCPE, everything that you hear us accepting as grants or gifts at the school committee meeting goes into that. And then our circuit breaker this year, we're looking at 591. So that, another important piece is that the FTE number. So we have almost 41 people, FTEs, that are working in the district today that are being paid outside of the budget. So it's not like, if you go back to this, the Chapter 70 and the local contribution typically make up the entire budget. We have 40 different people working in district that are being paid outside of that. It just gives you the real sense of what it costs to run the district. It's not just the budget that we have up there. So looking at some of the wealthiest communities in Massachusetts, if you remember last year I did some comparisons of per pupil expenditure, but also looking at local tax bills and how much is spent in education. So Medfield has been identified as the number 19 in terms of wealthiest districts in the Commonwealth, with average household income of 138. And you'll see these are all the folks that we're always compared to. The districts that we're competing with for teachers, for everyone, that's who we're compared to, and that's also in the wealthiest communities in the state. So let's look at the per pupil expenditure. Again, when I did the presentation at the beginning, I talked about this is generated by the Department of Ed, and this is their way of showing how to compare apples to apples with school districts. Everything spent on education minus transportation. So you'll see where the state average is in red at $17,833. Our peer average, that group I just showed you, that peer average is right below the ones that we are always compared to, that we're always in competition, so to speak, with. Their average is at 19, and you'll see we're at 15,205. So Medfield has always been fairly low with per pupil expenditure. I mean, that's something that I think has been consistent, and we've been moving that moving the dial in the right direction as far as I'm concerned in terms of spending more for kids. But I think that's important to take a look at, the people that we're in competition with and that we're compared to all the time, and what would it be like if we spent just the average? And what would it be like if we spent what our peers spend? So this is a different one that I didn't share last year. This is something that you look at the municipal contribution, the percentage of local contribution, that's the municipal piece, right? So you look at the state average. Now the state average here is a little bit lower than Medfield because most people get more state money than Medfield, so it's going to reduce that number of what the local contribution is. And you look at all of our peers that are in the same situation we're in, is not getting a lot of Chapter 70 money. And you see where we are here, 1175. But you look at our competition, you look at Hopkinton, Sharon, Norwell, Westwood, Wayland, Wellesley, Weston, and you see how much their local contribution is. It's a lot, and it's a bigger percentage of what they do per pupil than what we're actually spending. Again, it's just a data point to look at. We're benchmarking against other communities, and it shows that we're doing pretty well, but we're not spending what others spend in terms of local contribution. So let's get into some of the summaries in certain areas. Student services, which encompasses a lot, not just special education. You'll see that the increase there is 11.5%, and I'll break down in more detail a couple slides. District services, increase of 3.1%. In our policy administration, a decrease of 0.2%. So let's look at student services a little bit closely. So the breakdown of that, district-wide staff is just over $1 million. Office support staff at 76. Tutoring that we provide for kids at 59. Our summer school program that we're required to do, 40,000. Testing and screening that happens at the younger grades, 47. Medicaid filing fee at 4,000. So Medicaid is something that we do as a school district that only we can generate this revenue. So we've done, I think in the last few years, over $200,000 of revenue generation that we can get reimbursed from Medicaid, and that goes directly to the town of Medfield. So that's unrestricted revenue the town gets. There's some places that won't even do this because they say that the schools don't get it. In my mind, we're on the same team here, and based on what the local contribution is, it comes back to us at some point anyway. So let's generate the revenue that we can. So a couple $100,000 in the last few years, and it's something that we've put an emphasis on going forward, that we're going to try to generate even more money there. But that we have to pay $4,000 to get that filing fee. To get that money back. Contracted services with outside providers, about $100,000. Supplies and equipment. There's a special education transportation, the 530, which is up 190 over last year. And then our district tuition of the 1.3 million. So there's the total of 3.2 in student services. So district services, you see the increase of 3.1. So district-wide staff, our maintenance staff, overtime for maintenance and summer help. Research and development is something that we're pretty proud of. Our teachers do a great job in the summer. They take a look at some projects they want to work on that are in line with our strategic plan. They get together either individually or with groups, so they either collaborate with their team or their department, and they do some great work over the summer, so we allocate $50,000 for that. Professional development, degree change, and course reimbursement, $117,000. So those are just different ways that we can provide PD to teachers. In the contract, it was $42,500 each year is allocated for teacher reimbursement for courses that they take. They have to apply. It's approved by a principal, approved by me, and then once they submit their grades, they get a reimbursement for the course they took. Teacher retirement and sick leave buyback, $42,000. So that's something that we keep in there. There are some teachers that are grandfathered into when they retire, they get a percentage of their sick leave buyback. And then there are some teachers that participate in a 403B program that gets a match there. So that's where the money comes there. Contracted services, we have lots of those, 288. Supplies and equipment at 196. Other custodial expenses at 13. And then there's our general education transportation at 1.4 million. So, you know, one of the things that we've talked about at this meeting and others is, and again, it's not popular, but we are, you know, one of the few districts around that does not have a bus fee. And, you know, looking at implementing a bus fee, we're not required to bus any kids 7 through 12. So there's no law or no requirement to bus kids 7 through 12. So you can actually start a bus fee, grades 7 through 12, implement that. It gets a little more complicated in the elementary grades because you are required to bus K to 6, but only kids that live a mile and a half from the school. So you can imagine what that looks like when you live on one side of town and you're paying for your child to go to Memorial, but not paying for your child to go over to Wheelock. So it gets a lot more complicated in the elementary grades. But, you know, just looking at districts around here that have to absorb the kind of money we have to absorb with these busing fees, it's a little less painful when you have revenue coming in on that side. So what does that revenue look like? If we were to do something like, you know, $360 per kid, which is essentially $2 a day, $1 each way, and we did 7 through 12, you're looking at revenue of about $250,000. You know, based on the numbers that we've had and we've looked at of ridership and collecting all that. So that, it doesn't solve the $1.4 million problem with transportation, but it certainly helps. And I think, you know, one of the things that we've talked about, and even with the bus company, is I think we're the only municipality that or district does not charge that Conley uses. And when those increases come each year, they're absorbed a lot easier in a place like Westwood where they're paying for busing. Dover-Sherburne cannot charge because they're regional school districts. So regional school districts get reimbursement from the state. So other than regional school districts, I think we're probably the only one around that does not charge. So just, you know, just want to put it out there as a potential revenue source. Again, not popular, but something that we could discuss in the future. Looking at the budget summary for policy administration, central office staff, general reserve. So that general reserve is usually an amount used to look at non-union personnel and apply their raises. So if they are contracted employees, so non-union people, that any raise comes out of that general reserve. Office support staff, legal at $50,000. You know, we're hoping that's going to get covered this year, our legal. We've had some stuff where we had to a little bit more than we typically do. One of the savings that we do in legal that we've done since I've gotten here, and the school committee's been great about it, is that we've been able to do a collective bargaining without an attorney present. We've been able to do some interest-based bargaining the last couple of times, which really saves money. Think about the amount of money that's saved that you're not paying an hourly rate for an attorney to sit there 2 and 3 hours each time you do negotiations. So, no, there's anything wrong with that. Yes. Of course, we know you don't charge $2.25 an hour for, you know, I'm sure yours is a little bit higher, but that's the Boston rate. So, anyway, so we've definitely saved some money around there, around that area, but we have some increase this past year. Supplies, equipment, and contracted services, $70,000. So here's a unique one to us. This is a Medfield thing. Utilities and rent. So to have central office downtown at Town Hall, we pay $27,500. So that's our rent, and that's our utilities that we pay there. It's interesting because we can't control the heat or the air conditioning, but we pay $27,500, which is always fun. A tech and accept membership is $25,000. So those are the two collaboratives we belong to as a school district. We save a lot more than that, notwithstanding the transportation. But with tech, we do a lot of cooperative purchasing. So again, that economies of scale, we get with a lot of districts to purchase certain materials. We're now doing cafeteria food through them. We're doing a lot of cooperative purchasing through tech, and Accept saves us money with special education programs, and up until this year, saved us money with special education transportation as well. School committee expense, that's mostly looking at our revision of our policy manual. District-wide PD at $30,000, technology, there's a big number at $539, and then textbooks fall under this. So some of you might be saying, why does this fall under policy and administration? Why doesn't it fall under that? This is all driven by the Department of Education. They tell us where everything has to be, because they take all the data back at the end of the school year, and they run all these crazy reports that we get, and that's how it all happens. So some of the things don't really seem to match, but they're driven by the Department of Ed, and they tell us what we have to do. So looking at the summaries for our elementary schools, so if most of our budget is driven by instruction, which is our teachers, our teaching assistants, those folks that are working with kids, then it makes sense that they drive, those numbers drive the increase as well. So you look at Memorial School, an increase of 8.7%. So a couple of things. One, when we lost the Chapter 7, the Title I money, used to be Chapter 1, Title I money, the person that was working and being paid under that was at Memorial. So we had to increase, find money to put that increase in Memorial. So that's an increase of that position. Would have been part of the Title I money, but it was removed. And then we also added the additional staff member for kindergarten in there. Wheelock School, we had lots of hires as well for class size last year, so you have an increase of 8.1. Dale Street at 2.2. A lot of this is based on who you hire and how much experience they have, because the longer the teacher works, the more experience, the more money they make in their salary. So a lot of that is based on that. So 2.2 over at Dale Street. But you see fairly consistent in terms of requests. Increase, I guess, is different here because of the staffing, but the budgets are pretty close. That was not like that years ago. Dale Street was way ahead of the other two schools. So we've tried to make sure it's much more equitable now. You'll notice when we get to the middle and high school, it costs a lot more money to run both a middle and a high school. You'll see that if you just take a look at, we're looking at $3 and $4 million, $7 and $9 million for middle and high school. So a lot more money, 3.9 and 2.3, a lot of staff, a lot of kids, a lot of programs. It makes total sense. But no matter where you go, you're going to see a middle school or a high school cost more than elementary schools to run. So our total budget requests, FY 2020, $36,661,454, a change of $1.5 million or an increase of 4.54%. You remember if you looked at what was sent home or was on the web before, it was 4.85. So we're down to the 4.54, and that's really some reduction with the kindergarten teacher, some other reductions, looking at scheduling at the high school with a possible 0.6 reduction there as well. So we're getting it down a little bit. That's the breakdown here by school. You see a percentage breakdown, essentially what I just showed you, but in a pie graph form. So let's look at the breakdown a little bit for the increases. So teachers, steps, lanes, percent increase in longevity, which is a 2% increase. That was what we negotiated, $924,000 for next year. We're looking at an increase in paraprofessionals at 121. All other staff, their steps or their percentage increase at 61,000. Special education definitely has some increases there. Tuitions increased 93. Our new positions, which we'll get to as we go through, 112,000, and that transportation increased to 190, which is really problematic to us. Supplies and services up 20, utilities up 42. A lot of that is water. You know, lots of school districts don't pay water bills. It's kind of all part, like town municipalities cover that. We pay water bills. We pay, what do we, 90, Michael? Almost 90,000 in water. So, you know, that's something that we've tried to work on a little bit. Many communities just distribute those water bills in the municipal buildings throughout the entire town. We pay those. It's kind of like that rent thing. It's a Medfield thing. And then our transportation, 24,000, that's our general ed transportation with that. So here's something that I know that folks were, when we were doing the override last year, and the Board of Selectmen and the school committee were working together, and they're trying to get an agreement. And we posted it on the web last year. If you go to the budget for FY19, it's all up there. One of the things that we tried to do was say if the override passed, that we would commit to a 4% only increase. And that's been our target this year, the 4%. That was never signed. It was always in draft form. There was never an agreement between the school committee and the Board of Selectmen. But I want to just illustrate to you what this is all about in terms of the 4.54 and the 4%. So our payroll request is 29 million, non-payroll at 6, the total is 36. The increase is 1.5. We just went through all this. 4.54. Special education unanticipated increase was 190 for the transportation. The request without that transportation increase, the percentage increase without that, percentage increase without the transportation is 4. So that really put us in a bad spot, that 190,000 there. The other stuff is all personnel, salary, things that we were going to do anyway that either negotiated or part of a contract, but that unanticipated number really threw us off target for that 4%. But I just want to be clear about that. That was something that the school committee and the Board of Selectmen were working on. It was never an official agreement, but that was our target that the school committee wanted us to hit this year, and that's what we tried to do. And we still, again, there's a long way to go, but that's what we're looking at. So some of the positions that were requested that didn't make the budget, 0.2 LMC, Library Media Center at Memorial, 0.5 reading at Blake, 0.5 adjustment at Blake, 0.5 guidance at Wheelock, and 0.5 LMC aid at Dale. So those are some positions that either were brought by department heads or principals that were not put in the budget. So let's just go through this a little bit, why the need for the 4.5%. So it maintains most of our current staff and programs, includes steps, lanes, longevity, a 2% increase to Unit A, which is our teachers. Funds $100,000 to address the teacher stipends that are currently being discussed. So there's a group called the Faculty Advisory, and we meet every month. And one of the projects we took on last year was looking at stipends from other communities, compare them to Medfield, and we've been working through that for probably 2 years now. And now we're going to work through that again with an additional $100,000 to address some of the issues that we have with our stipends, because they just were way out of whack compared to our comp districts that we use. We use Westwood, we use Holliston, we use Hopkinton, and we use Wayland. Those are our comp districts when we do any negotiations. It funds all of our collective bargaining agreements, secretaries, custodians, teaching assistants, and food service, increases our professional development. So one of the great things we have is 3 buckets of professional development. So we have the R&D, which I spoke about earlier. We have conference and travel, which is where teachers get to go to a workshop and it pays for that. And then we have the course reimbursement, the $42,500 each year. Adds 1 kindergarten teacher, adds additional positions of special education, a 0.5 teacher at Wheelock, a 0.4 transitional coordinator. So currently right now, we don't have a transitional coordinator in district. So what that means is kids from 18 to 22 that we're still working with us, right now we're contracting out for those services. If we have a transition coordinator, that person can work with our own students, develop programs within our district, and allow those kids to have experiences in Medfield, not other communities. It will save us money in the long run, and it's better for our kids. Students special education. So we have certain students special education that we have an obligation to educate beyond high school. So we do transitional services now, again, through Accept Collaborative or another program, depending on the student. But this position will allow us to do that all in-house, have those kids working in our community, trying to get jobs in Medfield so that they're working a couple of days a week and doing that. So we need someone to coordinate that, and we feel like that's an important position for us. And then a 0.2 psychologist at the high school. So some of the thinking around not funding an adjustment counselor at the middle school, we currently have 1 adjustment counselor we added a few years ago, and that person is in charge of 6 through 12, which is a lot of kids that he works with. We're looking at adding additional support for the school psychologist at the high school and try to take some of the kids that Russ is working with, and that person will work them as well. So we felt like that was a better model for us right now, and we'll see how that works for us next year. This budget also reduces 0.6 FTE at the high school, and that's really not defined yet because they're not doing, the schedules aren't finalized, but we feel comfortable with that reduction at the high school at this point. 30,000 increase in technology, the increases to our general and special education transportation, supports year 2 of the policy manual revision with MASC that the school committee is working on. And it level funds almost every non-personnel. Some of them we can't level fund, but most of them are level funded there. So I just want to take a drink. I got some questions on the Google form that I sent out. I didn't identify anybody, but I thought it makes sense to share some of the questions that we got. We didn't get a lot of questions, but I think we could either answer the questions here through our presentation, or we can answer them as we go along. So I'd like to know what items would be on the list of things to cut in order to reduce the budget to 4% or some other figure suggested by the warrant committee. Are we at the point of considering asking families to pay for bus transportation? This seems like a large expense and is a perk, not a necessity. Those who don't want to pay could just drive their children to school. So I think from right now until probably March is when we start to really look at what we need to do in terms of reducing. So we do that at the school committee meetings that we'll have in February, March, and we'll present some of those reductions, but we're not at that point right now. We feel like this is what we're going with this evening, and then as more information comes in, we'll make reductions as the school committee asks us to do that. I think I already addressed the bus transportation issue, but that was one of the questions that we got. This next question had a lot of information above it, but I had to kind of truncate that so it would fit on this. So my question is, either what changed so dramatically that the board did not expect, or where did the board err in its analysis that the large increase in 2019 would prevent the need to come back to town soon after for a large increase? So that was essentially looking at the original initial budget number and saying, and he gave a lot of good information. Basically, you said at 6.1 override, we weren't going to ask for a lot of money. Now you're coming back for almost the same amount, was the question. So I think we tried to answer that as much as we could as far as that slide that shows our real ask was around 4% without that transportation problem that we have right now. I think that's where we incurred most of that increase. Hello, I'm hoping to see the chamber strings ensemble stipends for both the high school and middle school be included in the FY20 budget as accredited class that has been in place for and highly successful for more than 5 years. The stipend expense should be in the school budget. Will these stipends be included in FY20 budget? So that goes back to the $100,000 that have been allocated for stipends. So that's really a conversation that Teacher Association and I and the school committee are having, whether or not that gets in there. It's not in there yet because we haven't decided what that $100,000 is going to go to in terms of that. Will the 2 kindergarten teachers, again, that was the original, remember we had 2 in there. Will the 2 kindergarten teachers be enough for the 2020-2021 class, which I've heard is the largest class ever seen in Medfield? So we did figure out we could do the 1 based on the numbers that we had. And that isn't the largest class that Medfield has seen. There's a few coming after it that are a lot larger, a lot larger. I thought the last year there was no room for additional class in Memorial, so we have room for 1 more class, and we're going to be moving some other classrooms around. We're not going to touch music or art. They're still going to stay in those same rooms, but we're going to restructure some of the other rooms to open up a space for a full-day kindergarten. Could we shift transportation costs to families with school-aged children as a way to reduce the increase? I know not much, but it could be a way for us to show the rest of the town how we're trying to reduce the increase. What is your proposal to get 3%? Hopefully we don't have to get there. I know that's not part of the budget, but in regards to updating Dale, has there been serious consideration to building a K-5 school and converting Memorial or Dale to a big rec center? That way you would only have to update 1 elementary school versus 3 moving forward. That has not been a conversation that we've had at all. The cost of that would be prohibitive for this community, in my opinion, if we did 1 big K-5 school. I would like to add my support for putting chamber strings ensemble stipends at both the high school and middle school into the FY20 budget. As accredited class has been in place and highly successful for more than 5 years, the stipend expense should be in the school budget, not funded by a parent support organization. The point there is that MMA, the Music Association, has been funding that for the last 5 years. So again, it goes back to the stipend piece we talked about. So looking at the budget process now, it is definitely a long way from completion, but some of the key dates that I think it's important for everyone to know. We are meeting with the warrant committee on February 25th. Mike Pastore, the chair, has notified us that that's when we're meeting and that he'll provide budget questions to us prior to that. We have school committee meetings on the 11th of February, 11th of March, and in April 1st. That's the one the last one right before town meeting. So the House and Senate budgets have not been released yet, so I'm anticipating it's going to be more than the $20 per kid that Governor Baker put out there, but we'll have to see. Again, the town range that we've been talking about is 3 to 4%, and I think it's just, I always put this on here just as a reminder that it really is a moving target, so we're trying to really develop a budget now that's going to be implemented a year, for a whole year from now, in months from now, but it's going to last more than a year. And things change. I mean, students move in, families move in, folks have different needs. So it is a moving target, and we do the best we can. But there are some times that schools get costs that are just uncontrollable, that we have zero control over, and we have to make sure we educate our kids. And sometimes it's not as cost effective as people would like, but it's the right thing to do and what we have to do. So. Madam Chair, I will take any questions that anyone has.
So if you could please state your name,
I move the opening of the budget.
all in favor?
I'm the bad guy who's going to tell you you have to say your name into the microphone so that we can make sure that you're recording. So when I say please say your name.
And I'm going to ask Michael LaFrancesca to be on deck because there are, I think, 354 line items. So just in case one's not coming off the top of my head, he'll help me out.
Someone's got to be first. Pots for the win.
And sympathy with crutches. Jerry Potts, 7 Curve Street. First of all, I very much appreciate the line item. I know many years we didn't get that, so thank you, Michael, for doing it. This is just a suggestion for the future. Last year, I tried to take the organization, the objects and projects, and Michael was kind enough to send it, and I exported it and put it in Access to try to group these, because in the world I come from, generally there would be organized by sort of categories and subcategories, so you could easily see it. So I just would ask, if in the future, thank you so much for providing it and giving us, time in advance, but if there's a way to group these, it would be a little bit easier just to see in the future, which are the categories, so you can see them quickly year over year, because as Jeff pointed out, 370 items. I'm old, my eyesight's gone, so it's a little harder to see it. But just a request for the future, but thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thought that was going to open things up. All right.
So Rebecca Venuti St. George, 14 Pound Street. So I had a question on the aides salaries for Dale, Wheelock, and Memorial, and what's the difference going on between the last year's budget and the next year's budget?
Do you know what line item it is?
Yeah.
The number?
It is, I just had it, 86, 87, 88. 89. I'm just wondering why, Dale is doubling, Wheelock's decreasing, and Memorial's doubling.
It's just based on students and the needs.
It's just based on.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
Those are for special ed aides? What about the classroom aides?
So the classroom aides depends on if they're in the kindergarten or preschool.
Okay. Yeah, because I see in 2018, Memorial's classroom aides were 162, and then it went down last year to 66, And then it's going back up, which I'm, totally in support of, to 128, but I was just wondering what was going on.
Probably the numbers were pretty bald.
Okay.
I didn't hear the answer.
Bonnie Marset, Colonial Road. Question about the per pupil spending. Is that based on FY19? For example, does it take into account the 616 override from last year?
It does not take, so it's based on the FY18 end of year report. So that's the most recent number from FY18.
Okay,
So
we
they
don't
won't
have-
calculate FY19 until the end of this year, and so they're always a little bit behind on that.
Okay. And then just a question about special education programming that's being
Sure.
proposed.
Okay.
What is it?
Oh, the programming?
Yes.
In regards to what? I mean, I'm just,
It said in the slideshow that there would be a budget driver increase in special education positions and programming, so.
so part of that is the transitional program, having that .4 person. So a few years ago, we did the program at the high school that we did a lot of construction around that for transition. So now it's adding that person to it and then providing additional transition in the community. So that would be the one that we're looking at.
Okay, so that's the only increase.
Mary, am I forgetting anything?
I think we are also looking at increasing special education staff and looking across the district and how we're utilizing staff to
So the transition is the only one that's been defined so far.
Okay, great, thank you. Question about the kindergarten teacher. I think my number is going to be off because it was based on 2 teachers, which was in the original packet. It was budgeted for $55,000. Since it's a tuition-based program, how does that compare to what we budget a salary for versus what we expect to come in tuition? So what's the difference?
So we typically budget $65,000 for a new teacher's salary. And our goal always is to pay half of that, at least half of that with our tuition. So that's where the $55,000 came. It was 2 teachers, and then we were looking at paying half of that with tuition. That's always what we try to do.
So it still costs us $25,000 even with tuition? Or,
Sometimes it's more than that, yeah. It all depends on what we hire. If
Okay.
someone has, like sometimes, people want to come to Medfield, so it's not like we're getting a lot of, we had openings last year for those class size positions. We had over 400 applicants for those. So, and many of those are people that have been teaching for many years, so they're not coming in at 42,000. Some of them come in at 80,000. So it all depends on who we hire.
so since we hired so many teachers last year, how did we come in if we budgeted around about $65,000 per position? Did we come in under that or over that?
Well, I think if you look at it by school in the summary, you can figure that out. So if you look at the Dale Street with only increasing at 2-point-something%, Mr. Grenham hired some younger teachers without a lot of experience there. And then some of the other schools hired teachers that were, so we were probably a little bit under.
Okay.
Probably a little bit under. We definitely weren't over on that. Only Nat goes over at the middle school. Yeah.
Not making a judgment, just asking a question. You sort of touched on this line item number 5, management reserve or manager reserve of 90,000. That's for non-contract employees. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So anyone that isn't in the union, it's for non-union employees. So anyone that's not a unionized employee, any increase to their salary is in there.
So why wouldn't that be in the budget? Why is it a reserve fund?
Yeah, it's not decided who gets what.
Okay, so that's to be determined. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so that number could change, obviously.
Well, no, the 90 will be there, but the portion of it that's spent could be different.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And then for the school committee, $15,000 in other expenses. I know that we're looking to do the policy review through Mass C, but it's been budgeted at $15,000 for the last 4 years. So I guess I'm wondering how much It says that we're in year 2 of that. How much did we spend already, and how much left do we have to go to complete that policy?
Well, I think, the 15,000 for that is always a placeholder every year. So even though we're doing that project, there's still other expenses that school committee might need, whether they go to a workshop or something like that. So that's always been what we keep for a placeholder. Mike, I don't know what we spent so far. Jess, do you know what it was?
So, we actually negotiated, so it was like over
3 years?
and then we got out of Main Street. So I think it was 35.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3,500, 3,500. And 3,500 of that, and $1,000 a year.
Yeah, yeah. But that's a placeholder. That's a $15,000 placeholder. It's probably, you look back at the budgets for, 15 years ago, it's probably about that too, so.
Okay, so by placeholder, you mean that all of that money is not spent generally?
Yeah.
So where would that money go when
Back
it's
to the
not?
town. at
Do
the
we
end.
ever give money back to the
Sure.
town? Every year?
Every year.
Cool.
Every year I've been here. I don't know if we did before, but every year I've been here.
Say, Megan and May, I went to the mass,
Yeah, the conference. Right.
not necessarily in $50 in registration. And I'm sorry, I did get my hotel reimbursed this year, I'm sorry. But it was $200, so, but there's those things, we have some obligation to professional development as well. So that does.
No, that makes perfect sense. It's a different number than 15,000, so curious where the rest of the money was. Okay, so maybe this answers my next question, but I know that we budgeted fiscal 19 for 140,000 for a new director of curriculum, instruction, and technology, but we decided that we weren't in a place to go through that hiring process, and so I think we've had someone doing part-time work in that.
Yeah, 2 days a week.
So where did the money that was budgeted for that in the override end up going, the
Still there.
140,000?
It's still there. We won't close out till the end of the year, so, unless, that person works more time, we're not sure, but right now it's 2 days a week, so we're just apportioning it that way.
Okay.
So Jeff, maybe it'd be helpful if you explain what happens at the end of the year, if you have money left over.
Sure, so at the end of each fiscal year, before we close it out, we look at an amount that we want to give back to the town that goes into their general fund, which funds free cash, which, isn't a lot of our 35 million. It's probably like $25,000 we give back to the town. And then what we'll try to do is prepay some tuitions for special education. So we'll look at, in June, we'll try to pay, if it's a summer program, July and August of the next year, or we might do July, August, and maybe September, or just September to try to get ahead of that. Out-of-district placements, so kids that are out-of-district placements that. Yeah, sure, out-of-district placements, so that one, that number we saw up there for special education tuition, we can sometimes, well, most of the time, we save money if we do it a couple of months ahead prior to the start of the fiscal year, so we try to get ahead of that a little bit.
All right, and the last piece is just a comment. The line item is very helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
It would be really helpful to also have the actual spending for previous years to help give budget context and highlight where we might be budget stressed or at budget capacity. Posting actuals helps with budget transparency and increasing the public's confidence.
So we take this right off our Munis system. So it's a system the town has, so it's whatever the town's using, we're using, and everyone can see all the numbers, so that's why we get it. Michael, no actuals on this one? Budget to budget, okay.
So it'd be helpful in the
Sure.
future.
Yep.
I know a lot of communities we compare ourselves to have it, so it's useful information.
Great.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Hi, Carol O'Connor Fisher, 22 Stagecoach Road. I'm a teaching assistant at Memorial, and the teaching assistants are concerned that there was a line item amount for our costs when negotiations are still ongoing and we have no agreements as of yet.
Okay. We have to do that. We have to put it in there.
We need to carry something in the
Yeah.
budget, even if it's always true. Well, every 3 years with the teachers, it's true that we haven't.
It's there, the teachers too.
yet. We have to carry something in the budget, but we're not in a position to negotiate here tonight.
I understand that. I was just raising the concern that there was a budget item, but we're still talking about it.
Right. We do that, even with the teachers, Carol, we do that.
Okay.
It's always in the budget, so whenever that happens, any of the other bargaining units, we have to have a placeholder, we have to put something in there. So it's always there. And it will be there the next time we negotiate too.
Okay.
It's always there.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yep. Chris Potts, 7 Curve Street. I have just a few different questions. One is, has to do actually with our overall salary schedule policy. So it's really a question up for the school committee, I believe. So according to our policy, GCBA, which is professional staff salary schedules, and I believe this is pretty consistent with other districts in Massachusetts, so it's really not unusual. But, you know, the teacher component of it, I completely understand. It's the principals and administrators component that I'm a little confused about. So it basically states that salaries for both of those categories, principals and administrators, will be reviewed annually prior to July 1st. And the school committee essentially will establish levels of compensation for the position based on the circumstances, dynamics, and requirements of each position. Having been to pretty much every school committee for the last meeting for the last 4 or 5 years, I've actually never seen the school committee review these salary levels. So my question is, how do these salary levels get reviewed? And then also for the last 2 years, the last school committee meeting of the year has been canceled. So I guess I'm just questioning how these magic numbers for administrator increases, for new positions like a curriculum director, other positions that are non-union, how do they get established? What's the process?
When they're hired, superintendent hired, he makes a hire to approve it. We don't actually, I take it back, we don't approve hires other than superintendent and certain senior administrators. I have in my 9 years here had lots of conversations with superintendents about Dr. Martin and Mr. McGuire, I seen them together. Some of you never even heard of Mr. McGuire. About the proposed increases for various administrators. I don't recall specifically where it's been. I know several times with Mr. McGuire, certainly in the second session, we were negotiating administrative contracts in open session. I don't specifically recall exactly how we've done that, but certainly those get reviewed.
Okay, it just seems like that should happen in an open session if some levels of compensation are being voted on or approved in terms of levels.
School committee votes that general reserve account, which is where it comes from, so it's there.
Yep. Okay.
Contractual? No. 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 No, there's no fixed number in there.
Yeah, I guess I'm just sort of used to being in the corporate environment where when you're hiring for a new position, you're always given, as a hiring manager, you're giving a salary range, that you're going to hire somebody within this salary range and you're not to go over it. And yet we don't really find out what the salary ranges for a position are until after the person gets hired. It's never really made public. Unless and you're not, even when you're on the search committee, you don't even know what those salary ranges are. So it's a different process in education than I'm used to in the corporate environment, and it seems kind of odd to me from a taxpayer standpoint. The other question I had too is in terms of year-end accounting. I have seen in other school districts where they will close out the budget at the end of the school year, and that hasn't happened in the last couple of years, and I think that really goes a long way toward helping people understand just the budget process. So I just was wondering We don't even have the final current budget on the website for the FY19, so I just wondered if that could get posted too. And then my last question had to do with just the process with the mask policy service that we're hiring. I'm very familiar with the mask policy site. It's a great resource to go on there. I haven't seen Medfield's policies on there yet, so I'm curious about the process of what are the steps as part of our contract with mask to have them provide the policy services, and what the timeline is for that.
So Jeff and I and Michael and Francine have spent a significant amount of time kind of gathering all of the information that Mass needs. It's policies, it's all of the binders and books and then as we realized that we needed to review a couple of policies, kind of move forward immediately, we kind of put a hold on that for a minute. Now that that policy that Mary was working on, was voted in, is done, we're going to start that process again where we actually hand it over to them. They're going to spend probably 2 or 3 months at the very least going through, digitizing, evaluating, looking at our policies as they are held up against the mass kind of current rubric. And then we will be kind of talking about how they meet with Medfield's needs, and then we'll start presenting. And I think our hope is to do this beginning, we're projected in the fall, starting to really kind of churn through our policies with first reading, second reading. And that should probably take, I would say, reasonably about another 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
That's our time.
Thank you.
Definitely in process.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't know what the behind-the-scenes process was based on the budget.
Copying and finding.
Yep, okay,
And really trying to put a lot of information together, there's a lot of moving pieces.
Yep.
Make sure that we put right.
yep, thanks, Jess. Okay, that was it, thank you.
Thank you.
At the risk of playing stuff, Mr. Burnett, I do have some questions.
Would you like me to sit down there or stay up here? I'll stay up here. Okay, great.
So the first question I have is towards the back of the line item. There are tuitions here. You mentioned tuitions would pay for enrollment. We still carry 10,000 in our operating budget. I know that ordinarily those tuitions are covered on the town side.
They definitely are, yeah.
What's the 10 grand that we try to carry here for almost tax?
What number is that, Chris?
We are from the law.
So the last, I think 3 or 4 years, Norfolk Aggie has done, they have the, and this is this obscure law that regional school districts that are agricultural districts can do. They have assessed us additional money on top of what we pay them already. So we get a bill usually in the fall saying that these are the amount of kids that are here, and I forget what, Mike, remember what LAR, I forget what LAR is, but they double assess us essentially. So they do the assessment that the state does, and they do an additional assessment on top of that. So we get stuck paying that each year. It's per pupil, yeah.
That's a great school board to sit on, because there's nobody here asking how you're spending the money.
And we've gone back and forth with that with the town, because we feel like it's a town responsibility because that's what the assessment is. But we've carried it the last few years because we've ended up just having an agreement that we cover it, so.
So two lines up from that.
Yep.
Tuitions in
So is that 350? I'm looking at line item 350. Okay. Michael, what's that area?
We have 3 line items, special education, collaborative,
That's what I thought, collaboratives.
so such as the school interconnect, math hospital,
That increase alone is a 24, almost a 0.5% increase. Is that, is it really from the district? Is that
No, that's-
requirements? Is it?
That also includes the collaboratives that we are not members of. So if we have students that are taking the programming, but accept collaborative or tech collaborative do not have it, we can then move into the private school sector, or we can look at other collaboratives that have programming that meets the needs of the student, but that might be a little bit more competition as well. So the Mass State schools include the lab for collaboratives like those other collaboratives within the state.
So I guess I'm still, that number went from 130,000 in FY19.
Yeah, just based on the kids that we have. I mean,
So that's what I
yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes, and some of that also is projecting some for some of the 18 to 22 programming needs that we currently have that, as we were saying, we don't have programming needs in the district, so some of them are for that as well.
And the reason I focus specifically on that is that, and kind of again, this is my in past years, the conversations with the North Committee, there's been a lot of frank conversations, but not all North Committee members have background in education, and they don't understand how special education costs.
Right, right.
Work and may not, and are oftentimes beyond our control, so we have sort of, a lot of times, taken out of those exceptional costs and said, hey, look, if you take that, just that increase out, our budget's about 4.1% increase. And I think that, that's a pretty exceptional, and unfortunately, we can't sit with the warrant committee and say, here are the IEPs of individualized education programs that require that, or use jargon. And so, I think that's really something that we need to work with the warrant committee on, because it's an exceptional, and it's, out of district tuitions or something, which is really hard to predict. It's a little bit less than that increase, because we do see a decrease in the tuition for non-public schools. Those are private businesses.
And we've had some students that have moved from private school into the Mass State schools because they often offer programming within public school education as well, so they have some opportunity for students to experiences. Which is why we often come to make those changes.
Thank you. So I think something I can move on to, again, in past years, I sat with the warrant committee and said, we're going to $200,000 increase that we didn't expect. I mean, one year we had almost a $240,000 increase for just one student.
Correct.
That's acceptable. I'm a little more from the inside, Dr. Marcy, the copier leases.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a separate line item for copier maintenance. And then over the course of the 5 fiscal years, the net amount spent is about the same, it's about $50,000 to $60,000. But I'm wondering, moving to the lease system, which I think we did in FY17, has resulted in any savings for us, or just more reliability, or?
Well, certainly more reliability. I mean, we had issues years ago where machines were purchased and they were kept, and it was, one step away from a cranking with blue duplicating fluid. I mean, they were some real bad machines there. We've absolutely had much better reliability, and then we've gone to networking a lot of the printing in 2 of our schools, much to the chagrin of some people. So, we need to have copiers that can handle that kind of, volume. So we make sure that we do that.
So the maintenance, is the maintenance just for the few machines that we still own, or is that?
It's for all of them.
Maintenance contract by a company?
For all of them, on top of the lease too, yeah.
And then, this might be a question more for Mr. Lassiter, but in the IT instructional hardware and IT infrastructure lines, one's gone down by about $80,000, the other's gone up by $80,000. Is that
reclassification. Reclassification from the state, yeah.
I noticed there's a big increase, again, on the main side, a big increase in heating at Memorial, but a decrease in electricity. I know we just put a new boiler there, is that related to that, or? Is
The
it-
boilers that we lock.
The boiler that we lost.
Yeah.
And I don't know why heating has to go up so much.
Missy's always cold. That's one of the issues. Yeah, jeez.
We have to speak up. We gotta replace some of the valves in the classrooms, so we look back in the morning, because they weren't working properly. So now that there is a better heating system in the classroom.
So we should not manage this.
With respect to the special education transportation, I don't think there's anything to do about it for FY20, but I guess if Framingham pulling out of that collaborative, that's what we're current problem. Are there other options for us? I mean, Framingham, I think, is bringing it in-house, they're not sure we just, is that something we could consider, or is that?
So we could consider that for our in-district transportation. So students that have special education transportation but still go to Medfield schools, we could certainly do that with the purchase of a couple of vans. We could not do it for out-of-district ourselves. We definitely could not. We still would have to contract out for that. The other,
Is there any savings to transport in the district?
probably over time, in the long term, it might, but then you have additional costs for staffing, hopefully not get benefits in there as well and all that. So there's that particular piece in there. Mary's been working with, Millis did do that a few years ago. So Mary's been working with them, trying to come up with a plan for not next year, but the year after, if we could work with Millis to do our in-district instead of contracting with Accept or someone else. That would save us some money as well. What are we at, 12 kids, Mary, about 12 kids in district? Yeah, so 12 kids in district that we're doing. It's,
That's because if you take that increase, special ed transportation, and the increase in tuitions, that's almost a full percent.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are really items that are beyond our control. The reading literacy supply lines that have gone up, are there specific, this is in 106, I'm looking at, are there specific items that teachers requested there, or is farming requested there?
Yeah, I think we're looking at updating our kits for that.
When we dropped the expense for virtual instructional technology, that's the online courses, is that because kids are taking those less, or we're offering less?
So we get a lot of those as a member of Tech. We get them free now. So we still have virtual high school out of Accept, but now we have TECA through Tech. And because we're a member of Tech, we get X amount, I think it was 42 classes per semester from Tech. So we're able to do that.
Very close to the end. So we always carry a line item for textbook adoption.
Right.
And it'd be useful, I think, at our next meeting to have a presentation on what textbooks are supposed to be adopted.
So the $40,000 line item we have? Okay.
Just generally what new textbooks we're offering, proposing. And then in the same regard, I looked at, first I want to say, Dr. Martin has recommended in every budget, a couple things. One, a gift and development program, which is never able to fund. And two, that we fund the one-to-one devices at the middle school. And it's a tremendous expense, and we've never been able to take it off in the district, but as somebody who kids have now gone through middle school and are now in high school, wow, I wish to God we done it. Because if you have a kid in middle school and high school, you know that those devices can be in the hands of teachers and in front of teachers tremendously helpful. They're also tremendously distracting to students, even when teachers in the classroom, because they can't be looking at every screen and knowing if they're texting others or if they're playing one of the video games. I'm blessed with girls who don't care about video games, as far as I know. But they may well be watching Netflix. So, when we own those units, we can lock them down and prevent that from happening to a significant extent. So I think not making that investment is really hindering the ability of our teachers to make most of those one-on-one devices. Having said all that, I'm certainly not prepared to advocate today that we have that 3% of the budget. But I do wonder, is back when we first started, that when we had the first pilots? I asked you a little bit about the market.
A couple years before I got here, I think.
So back then, one of the selling points, and it was really an hypothesis, but Mr. McGuire, who was the superintendent at the time, suggested that we'd actually save money because we didn't use many textbooks. Or we're not going to buy any textbooks. And certainly, you know, at the high school, obviously we still need to have some textbooks. And you know, I remember sitting in this very seat last year saying, you know, my daughter's math class doesn't have enough math textbooks for them all.
I remember that as well.
I'm sure you do. But, you know, I also wonder, if, you know, these are items, the textbooks that goes to high school are items that we're level funding every year. And I guess it would be useful, well, none of those big numbers, but together they add up to, I don't know, maybe $40,000. I was told it would be that. That's very high. But I'd like to take a look and see, you know, what is it that we're actually spending for those textbook lines, particularly for middle school and high school. Because I know obviously the English classes, thank goodness, are still using books with paper, and obviously all the classes are still using some form of textbook, but not every day. And so this isn't enough money to implement a new textbook program. I'm sure it's we are replacing some that get lost or we'll buy a bus or something like that. But I would like to take a closer look at how we're spending that textbook allocation, and if we can do more electronically to try to save.
So I will tell you that the biggest increase, one of the biggest increases in technology in our budget is the amount of applications that we have. So we have to, you know, buy the licenses for those each year, and that's increasing. And to your point on iPad, the last couple of years we've been able to monitor a lot, even if we don't own them. The parents sign off on a management system and allow us to kind of control that. So that's been really helpful the last couple of years with that. But we can get you that information, Chris.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as we're adding that technology, the license expense, I'm not seeing these numbers go down.
Okay.
The last thing, and I've said this again every year, each one of the 9 years I've been on the board, I totally understand why top last. I understand why people suggest transportation fees would be attractive. But we live in a town where we don't have neighborhood schools. And any of you who's driven, I've now driven to every one of the schools for drop off in more than years on end. They're really not safe places to be driving anymore. And there are long lines at every school. And I think if you implement a transportation fee, no matter how de minimis it is in comparison to what the average family is in Medfield, there's going to be a significant amount of people who say, you know, I drive my kid 4 or 5 days anyway, I'm not going to pay that, and I'll just drive it. And I think you're going to see an increase in traffic around schools. You know, if you think about particularly the elementary schools, there's really that circulation there. And I'm uncomfortable with doing anything that's going to add a level of traffic, especially with elementary schools. I think, you know, at the middle school or high school level, there's a sort of more expected circulation pattern. But you can drop your kid off. They probably don't want to see you anyway. Like that. So I personally have a lot of concerns about it. I won't rule it out as it doesn't have, but I have a lot of concerns about it.
But on another note, Chris, I think we've reached a point where I think this conversation deserves some due diligence. Because I think you can roll it out in terms of, with this revenue, what is the value add for the families, and maybe approach it that way. So if we're getting, what, 250 is the guesstimate, Dr. Marsden?
Yes. That's high school only.
Sorry?
That's 7 through 12 only.
Yeah, so what are our families getting from that? So I think if we kind of look at it from different angles, I think we should just at least talk.
No, I will keep on mine. I'll just tell you, I hear it. And I think, I'm not sure I agree with that estimate, because I think schoolers buy their interest, buy to the pool. Well, I have to go to work or whatever, which is just think the video rubric is not happy with me, but I think we should take a look at how that. The last question I had, Dr. Martin, was there a couple comments about orchestra and strings stipend.
Yes,
If it's a credited class, is it taught by a teacher or is it?
yes.
So why would we look at a stipend if it's, if the teacher's being paid
It happens after school.
of that?
Yeah. After school hours, I should say.
That's all I. Maybe not entertaining.
There's money and then there's quality of life. And again, I do think that it is, I need some hard numbers around it, but I also don't think that the ways that a bus fee would impact the stresses of our families, the amount that we already asked our families to pay, either directly or indirectly, in order to keep this sustain their kids in school and have the funding that we have. These are things that we need to do very seriously, and I certainly absolutely want to be thinking about this school year, frankly, about some very, very hard numbers. Consider it in the future. Consideration is not easy, but I would consider it a mistake. That's my concern. Very, it does, absolutely, but I just need to say, if we are so frequently focused on social emotional learning, on understanding how to manage schedules, on understanding all of these things, I would need to see that by us being, it's, we're held kind of over rail a lot with them, and we'll get to decide how much we do those. But there are needs that we would feel for our kids by us being. And I don't know that I would feel okay about that number and just direct it back. I would need to see something else. That house, a little bus. Value add. Right.
Okay, okay. Thanks, everybody, appreciate it.
Can I just ask one quick question? Janelle McCardle. I'm at 277 North Street. One is super probably simple, is the Tri-County and the Norfolk money that we have to pay, what is that for?
The students that go there. So Medfield students that attend there, and that's a state assessment, so when they come out with all the assessments that the town's required to spend, they decide how much that is based on the number of students there.
Okay, got it. And also, so the class that's coming in, not next year, but the year after, is the one that spikes really high in terms of the projected numbers. How are you going to work within the constraints of the override or the increase? Like, how are we going to feasibly do that for that class coming in?
Well, I mean, I
What
think
are
we-
options on that, I guess?
So we have options as far as space. We need to look at space, because if we're adding one classroom next year for kindergarten, we'll have to add a first grade the following year. So we'll have to do better with space. We'll have to look at existing space at Memorial or any other space around Memorial that we might be able to use. And then, we'll look at what we do in terms of staffing. We'll have to, it's not going to be easy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think the other thing too, and I said it at at a school committee meeting a couple months ago, is that we need to look at short-term modulars. If we get 300 kids,
We're
look
going to
out.
have to do something.
Yeah, but right now, it's, we're in good shape in terms of what we have for kids next year based on the projections. And we have the room for just that one extra class, and then we'll go from there. But we've been working, and one of the things that I talked about when I met with all the PTOs this last couple of weeks is that, we're working on different, scenarios on that. But until we're done with what it looks like and we're totally finished with that particular scenario, we're really not going to share it publicly because we don't need to take on a life of its own.
Okay, perfect.
So that's
Thanks.
where we are.
McCardle. Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be,
Dr. Martin talked earlier in the presentation about a proposal of the school committee, well, that I actually discussed with one of the selectmen, to try to get the selectmen support the over last year, in exchange for some commitments by the school committee. And I would say this budget, despite just seeing the 4% up there, if you read that document, it actually accounts for saying, it says that, that doesn't account for things you can't predict, like special education tuition,
Enrollment.
enrollment, right? I mean,
Yeah.
increases in special education costs. So if you take those numbers out, it's about 0.8%, then this budget is about 3.7% increase, and that would be within the scope of the agreement. We hope to have, so we have this for the selection.
right.
That didn't happen, but that's not their fault. They had a lot of other overrides that they were paying attention to all at the same time. I'll say, just so everybody knows, I'm not all for raising taxes. I didn't vote for most of them. Because I thought that we were really taxing the taxpayers, taxing public,
Yeah.
stressing the tax levy with what we're already doing. But I do want to be clear that this budget that we're voting for the moment, in my view, because it has to be entered in that agreement, there's again, 0.8% increase here that totally is unpredictable. And that doesn't even account for increases in enrollment that we suspect are happening. But, I had a long debate with somebody tonight who I trust, and I think is a very smart person, who said, sorry, you didn't stand there. Well,
No, I'm fine.
He said that he doesn't trust our enrollment projections, and that's fine, but nobody told me where to find benefits. Somebody suggested another vendor.
Right.
And our enrollment projections, yeah, they were low last year. Are they adjusting? Are they trying to fix that by adjusting up? It's possible, but the numbers we're seeing actual enrollments, and you can look at the enrollment data online. The key thing I like to do is not look just across at what's happening in kindergarten, but look diagonally. And you should find a way to try to color code that or something to make it easier. So at least easier for me. So you can follow a cohort.
Yeah.
My daughter's class was in, we don't go back 2 years. She's in 10th grade now. Went back 5 years, see how big that 5th grade is and follow it down. Because those classes are getting bigger too. It's not just a whole bunch of kids moving in kindergarten.
Right.
Is what people think.
Right.
And I also want to say, this is an unpopular position, I think this sometimes. If you look at our class sizes today versus what they were at the height of our enrollment, at least as reflected using the tax of 2011, our class sizes on average are a lot smaller now.
And just from your guys' experience in dealing with the warrant committee, are like the numbers that you proposed, the 4 versus the 4.5 bridge, like, are they accommodating to understand that that was a
I mean, they're great to
$190,000
work
line
with.
item?
They're great to work with. We just haven't had that meeting yet, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just curious.
Just like everyone else, there's only so much revenue in the town. You
Right.
have to face the same problem.
Yeah,
So when they tell us to try to hit a certain number, it's not because they don't believe in education or value of education, it's because they're making, we have one priority.
yeah, right,
They have a lot.
yeah,
So we have to advocate to suggest that some of our priorities might be more
important than
important
others.
than some that, we think they might want to do in other departments.
Okay.
So I don't mean just start getting any around that.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
If you ever want to get just a snapshot,
Okay.
if you ever want to get a snapshot of how a town or municipality works, go to the markets that are not $200 education. The things you learn are so fascinating. And I'm not saying, oh, I mean, I took them. I'm saying they are fascinating. The number of things that we all dealt with. So again, when
$6,661,454.
I just want to thank you for that. I just want to also remind people, and I'm not advocating for this at all, but, you know, this was the first override we've had in a long time, and we appreciate it. But there was a time in this district where the school department got a 9.1% increase, and there were 5 overrides out of 6 years. Kind of like the Patriots in the Super Bowl, but overrides. 5 out of 6. So that there was a time when that was happening. If you just moved in, you don't know that, but you know, we're trying to live within that 4% as best we can, but there were times when it was 9 and followed by a 6 right after. So keep that in mind.
We have had a lot of legal expenses associated with any complaints, and one of the most recent ones focused in part on the fact that there was a mistake in the minutes about who made or seconded the motion to approve a field trip that was then passed unanimously. So I'm taking a position on not approving it now, so I can watch the video, although we know I'll be based on the file and have that opportunity to table December 3rd and 17 minutes.
Have you addressed the questions about the scholarships? Yeah. The question is on the McCormick Scholarship and on the grant scholarships. Were those addressed? Yes. And what was the point?
So there are several scholarships that are awarded at graduation from scholarship and now scholarship fund. They require us as a committee to approve the release of funds after a student's first semester or first year when they show that they're in good standing. So it's money that we have to release, but it's not in the operating.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking is that the Jean Harney McCormick Scholarship was my daughter's, was made by her husband in my daughter's memory. Is there any question about the sufficiency of the scholarship?
No, just at this time of year, we have to.
I understand that you're releasing the funds.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for your family's commitment. You know that former scholarship is getting along, actually, from the family. So he's a student at NYU. He did very well his first semester. So it's just, we're required to vote that out. We
Okay.
usually don't have a lot, we're pleased you're here, but we're going to hear about, we're having our discussion about it. We usually just, once we recognize that they meet the GPA requirements.
All right, thanks. That was my...
I just I just want to add to that as well, because I had the good fortune of being the one to actually award that scholarship, to hand that scholarship to Gideon at the senior night last year. And it was really a very special thing, because I know the Harneys very well, and Gideon Lung really, I tried to make this point in that he really represented who the Harney's daughter was in terms of her personality, her commitment to music, her commitment to academics, her commitment to acceptance, her commitment to her classmates and being there for them. And I just really wanted to make sure that everybody knew how special she was, especially with John here tonight. What was the award amount? Because I know that it wasn't in the actual letter, the dollar amount. 35, great, okay, that's awesome. Thank you.
Oh, is that a challenge?
Pleasantly surprised that those numbers got a lot of great feedback on the changes that this evening in the registration process. So we offer in the morning, afternoon, and evening. I think we work with great. Every family that's registered right now is so we thought that was important. Families that live in town, that have been in town, and get the first traffic away as opposed to some who move in April or whatever, and they so I got some emails from parents that work on that.
having 7 days to go. How are you? I did have a question. Without even looking at it, she pretty much asked all of them, but I do want to reiterate that I would like to have a discussion about it. But I want to actually congratulate you and thank you for all that you did in terms of the video that you put out. I thought the community council, really did that. Now we got this long video. The feedback that I got at least from neighbors, friends, was that it was all, maybe a different one. But I think you did a really good job. Trying to educate everybody on the subject. And going forward, I think we touched on something about the K-5 report card that they're working on and how they're going to be ready for spring. Previously, a little bit how that's going.
So at our last release day, it was the first time that all the elementary staff were together, they looked at that. So the folks that had worked on it for the past 18 months, the principals, they put it all together, planned an entire workshop for everyone, but they were all in the elementary cafeteria. It was the first time they got to see it, so they worked with their team, worked with them very well, to look at it, as I call it, the status of the process, right? And this worked well, this didn't, that kind of thing. So they've gone back to the meeting, I think, next week. And they're going, they'll be ready to present to you probably May. We did a little bit of It's going to be a nice way to consistently, for parents, to consistently get a sense of where your kid is. And that social emotional learning component is not.
I want to thank everybody who came tonight. For the first 6 budget cycles, I was here. We voted the budget. We had opened a public hearing. We probably closed it because the only people other than the school committee members and administration in the room were 2 more committee members and somebody on behalf of the MTA. Obviously weren't there to weigh in on the hearing. So I think we've come a long way. It seems a little more controversial to do it in a big setting, but I think it's reflective of the effort that I just talked about to get out more information and get people to show up. Because again, at least 6 budgets we voted without a single person in the community weighing in. So I think it's a great progress. So thank you, everybody.
I'd like to echo both of those items and say that we got this another comment too. I know I'm hungry for videos too.
I know Jeff wants to do like 5 more for this year.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Get new software. We can do that. Yeah. No, I'll take it aside.
watching Medfield TV, community shows.